I thought I knew him. The man I married, the one I promised to love forever, he was my safe place, my home. But then I found it, hidden under our bed, and everything I believed about him crumbled. It wasn't just a secret. It was a lie so dark, it made me question if I'd ever really known him at all. My name's Lauren, and this is the story of how a single moment turned my marriage into a nightmare, one I'm still trying to wake up from. Let me take you back to the beginning, when life felt like a dream. I was 27, living in a small apartment in Chicago, working as a graphic designer. My days were a blur of coffee runs, deadlines, and late-night Netflix binges with my cat, Muffin. I wasn't looking for love. Honestly, I was happy enough on my own. But then I met Ethan. It was at a friend's art gallery opening, one of those events where you're supposed to mingle but mostly just stand around holding a glass of cheap wine. He bumped into me, literally, spilling my drink and apologizing so profusely I couldn't help but laugh. He had this boyish charm, a crooked smile that made you feel like you were in on some private joke. We talked all night about art, music, the way Chicago winters make you question your life choices. By the end of it, he had my number, and I had butterflies I hadn't felt in years. Ethan was everything I didn't know I wanted. He was a high school history teacher, passionate about his students, always quoting obscure facts that made me roll my eyes but secretly love him more. He'd leave sticky notes on my fridge with silly doodles, plan picnics in the park, call just to hear about my day. 6 months in, I was head over heels. When he proposed a year later, down on one knee in the middle of a snowy park, his hands shaking, I didn't hesitate. I said yes, tears freezing on my cheeks, and for a moment, the world was perfect. We got married in a small ceremony, just family and close friends, at a little venue by the lake. Ethan's parents were there. His mum, Karen, all smiles and hugs, and his dad, Mike, quiet but warm. They lived a few hours away, so we didn't see them often. But they seemed to like me, always sending cards or calling to check in. Ethan's sister, Claire, was trickier. She had this sharp edge like she was sizing me up, but I figured she was just protective. I mean, who doesn't want their brother to end up with someone great? I didn't dwell on it. I was too busy being happy, building a life with the man I loved. Our first year of marriage was blissful, or close to it. We moved into a cozy house in the suburbs. The kind with creaky floors and a tiny backyard, Ethan swore he'd turn into a garden. I'd come home from work to find him grading papers at the kitchen table, glasses slipping down his nose, and I'd think, how did I get this lucky? Sure, there were little hiccups, bills piling up, arguments over whose turn it was to do the dishes, but nothing we couldn't handle. Ethan was my partner, my best friend. I trusted him completely. But then, about a year in, something changed. It was subtle at first, so small I barely noticed. Ethan started staying late at school, saying he had extra grading or parent meetings. I didn't mind, I was proud of how dedicated he was, but the late nights stretched longer, sometimes past midnight. He'd come home exhausted, barely talking, his eyes distant like he was somewhere else. I'd ask how his day was, and he'd give me one-word answers, brushing me off with a tired smile. I told myself it was stress, maybe a tough semester, but deep down I felt a prickle of unease, like a splinter I couldn't see. One night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan was out again, another late meeting, and the house felt too quiet, too empty. I was lying in bed, Muffin curled up beside me when I heard it. A faint scratching sound, like nails on wood, coming from under the bed. My heart skipped. Probably just the cat, I thought. But Muffin was right there, fast asleep. I held my breath, listening. There it was again, soft but unmistakable. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and leaned over the edge, half expecting to see a mouse or a loose floorboard. Instead, I saw something else. A small black notebook tucked against the wall, its cover scuffed like it had been shoved there in a hurry. I reached for it, my fingers brushing dust and cobwebs, and pulled it out. It was heavy, the pages worn, like it had been opened 1,000 times. I sat back on the bed, my pulse racing, and flipped it open. The handwriting was Ethan's, neat, slanted, unmistakable. But the words, they weren't lesson plans or grocery lists. They were names, dates, places. written like a log. October 12th, 2019, Lincoln Park, 2 a.m. March 3rd, 2020, West Loop, midnight. Dozens of entries, some with notes like careful or too close. My stomach twisted. What was this? Why was it hidden under our bed? And why did some of the dates line up with nights Ethan said he was working late? I closed the notebook, my hands shaking, and shoved it back under the bed. I couldn't think straight, couldn't breathe. When Ethan got home, I was still awake, sitting in the dark. He didn't notice at first, just kicked off his shoes and mumbled something about traffic. "Everything okay?" he asked, finally seeing my face. I nodded, my throat tight. I wanted to ask him about the notebook, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I lay there beside him, his breathing steady, and wondered who I'd married. The notebook haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those pages, those cryptic entries, Ethan's handwriting looping like a trap. I didn't touch it again. Not yet. Part of me wanted to believe it was nothing, just a quirky habit, maybe a journal for some history project. But another part, louder and sharper, screamed that I was lying to myself. Ethan wasn't the same anymore, and that notebook was proof something was wrong. I started watching him, looking for clues. The late nights didn't stop, but now I noticed other things. How he'd lock his phone the second I walked into the room. How he'd change the subject when I asked about his day. Once I caught him staring out the kitchen window, his hands clenched, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. I tried to talk to him to bring back the Ethan I knew. I'd cook his favourite meals, suggest movie nights, but he'd just smile distracted and say he was tired. It was like living with a stranger who wore my husband's face. I didn't tell anyone, not at first. How do you explain something like this? "Hey, my husband's acting weird, and I found a creepy notebook under our bed." My friends would think I was paranoid, and my family. They'd never liked Ethan much, always said he was too perfect, too polished. I didn't want to prove them right, so I kept it inside, the doubt growing like a weed, choking out the trust I'd once had. One afternoon, while Ethan was at school, I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed answers, needed to know what that notebook meant. I crawled under the bed, my heart pounding, and pulled it out again. This time I read every page, forcing myself to face whatever was there. The entries went back, years, before we met even. Some had initials beside them. JK, River North, 1 a.m. ML, Edgewater, 3 a.m. Others had symbols, circles, crosses, like a code I couldn't crack. Toward the end I found something worse. A folded piece of paper tucked between the pages. It was a photo, grainy and old, of a woman I didn't recognize. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and a nervous smile. On the back in Ethan's writing, "Don't forget." My hands went cold. Who was she? Why did Ethan have her picture? I sat there, the notebook in my lap, my mind racing. Was he cheating? Was it something worse? I thought back to all the true crime podcasts I'd listened to, the stories of husbands with double lives, con men, criminals, worse. No, I told myself, not Ethan. He was kind, gentle, the guy who'd cry at dog rescue videos. But the notebook didn't lie, and neither did the photo. I started digging. I Googled the locations from the entries. Lincoln Park, West Loop, River North. They were all in Chicago, some near bars or clubs, others in quiet neighborhoods. I cross-referenced the dates, looking for news articles, anything that might connect them. Most were dead ends, but one hit me hard. A missing persons report from 2019. A woman named Julia Kane, last seen in Lincoln Park. JK. My stomach dropped. The photo didn't match her description, but the coincidence was too much. I kept searching, my fingers flying over the keyboard until I found another. A hit and run in Edgewater 2020, victim unidentified. ML? I was spiraling, I knew it, but I couldn't stop. When Ethan got home, I was a mess. My eyes red, my laptop open to a dozen tabs. He frowned, setting his bag down. "Lauren, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice soft, concerned. I wanted to confront him, to shove the notebook in his face and scream, but I froze. What if I was wrong? What if I was right? Instead, I mumbled something about work stress and went to bed early, my back to him, his presence like a weight I couldn't shake. The next few weeks were torture. I lived in two worlds, one where I played the happy wife, cooking dinner, laughing at Ethan's jokes, and another where I was a detective, piecing together a puzzle I didn't want to solve. I started following him, just once or twice, parking outside his school, watching him leave. He didn't go to bars or motels, just drove home or to the grocery store, but it didn't ease my fear. If anything, it made it worse. His normalcy felt like a mask, too perfect to be real. I confided in my best friend Mia, swearing her to secrecy. I showed her the notebook, the photo, told her about the articles. Her eyes widened, but she didn't laugh or call me crazy. "You need to be careful," she said, her voice low. "If he's hiding something, he won't like you digging." I nodded, but careful wasn't enough anymore. I needed the truth, no matter what it cost. One night, Ethan was out late again, and I couldn't take the silence. I grabbed the notebook and went through it again, page by page, looking for anything I'd missed. That's when I found it, a loose page folded tight hidden in the back cover. It was a letter, written in a woman's handwriting, not Ethan's. "You can't keep doing this," it read. "I know what you are. Stop or I'll tell." My blood ran cold. Tell who? About what? I was still holding it when I heard the front door open, Ethan's keys jingling. I shoved the notebook under the bed, my heart in my throat, and prayed he didn't notice the terror on my face. Ethan walked in, his coat damp from the rain, and for a second, I thought he'd see right through me. "You're up late," he said, kicking off his shoes. His voice was casual, but his eyes lingered, like he was searching for something. I forced a smile, my hands clenched under the blanket. "Couldn't sleep," I said, hoping my voice didn't shake. He nodded, heading to the bathroom, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. But the letter burned in my mind, those words, "I know what you are," like a siren I couldn't ignore. I stopped sleeping after that. Every creak of the house, every shadow felt like a threat. I kept the notebook hidden, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, about her, the woman who'd written that letter. Was she the one in the photo? Was she still out there, or... I couldn't finish the thought. I started checking Ethan's things when he wasn't home. His phone, his laptop, his car. I hated myself for it, for turning into someone I didn't recognize, but the fear was stronger than the guilt. His phone was clean, too clean, like he'd wiped it. His laptop had a new password I couldn't guess. And in his car, under the passenger seat, I found a single earring, silver with a tiny pearl. It wasn't mine. I confronted him that night, the earring in my hand. "Whose is this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He blinked, surprised, then laughed. "Probably Claire's," he said, shrugging. "She borrowed the car last week." It sounded plausible. Claire was always losing things, but it didn't sit right. I pushed harder. "You're out late all the time, Ethan. You barely talk to me. What's going on?" His face changed then, not angry, but closed off, like a door slamming shut. "I'm working, Lauren," he said, his voice flat. "You know that. Why are you making this a thing?" I didn't mention the notebook, the letter, the photo. I couldn't. Not yet. I called Claire the next day, casual, like I was just catching up. "Hey, did you leave an earring in Ethan's car?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She paused. Too long. "No," she said finally. "I haven't been in his car in months." My stomach dropped. I thanked her, hung up and sat there, the earring in my palm, small and heavy as a bullet. Ethan had lied. But why? I went back to the notebook, reading it like a map to a place I didn't want to go. I started cross-referencing more dates, more initials, spending hours online, digging through old news, social media, anything. I found another hit. A woman named Megan Lewis, reported missing in Edgewater, 2020. ML. No photo, but the timeline fit. I printed everything, kept it in a folder under the couch, my secret growing as heavy as Ethan's. I didn't know what I was building, but it felt like a case, a reckoning. Mia came over one night, her face pale. She'd done her own digging, found a forum where people posted about missing women in Chicago. "There's a pattern," she said, showing me her phone. "Young women, late 20s, dark hair, all gone after being seen in places like the ones in Ethan's notebook." I stared at the screen, my throat tight. "It's not him," I said. but it sounded like a plea. Mia didn't argue, just hugged me, but I could feel her worry sharp as my own. The breaking point came on a Friday. Ethan was out, and I was alone, the house too quiet, the notebook calling me like a siren. I pulled it out, read the letter again. I know what you are. And something snapped. I couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep living with this shadow. I searched the house, top to bottom, looking for anything. Proof, answers, closure. I checked drawers, closets, the attic, my hands shaking, my breath short. And then I found it. In the basement, behind a stack of old boxes. A locked metal case, small but heavy, like it held a secret too big for the world. I pried it open with a crowbar, my arms burning, and what I saw stopped my heart. Photos, dozens of them, women I didn't know. Their faces frozen in fear, in pain. IDs, wallets, jewellery, a pearl earring just like the one in the car. And at the bottom, a knife, its blade stained dark. I dropped it, my scream echoing in the empty house, and stumbled back, my mind collapsing under the weight of what I'd found. Ethan wasn't just hiding something, he was someone else entirely. I didn't hear him come home. I was still in the basement, the case open, when his voice cut through the haze. "Lauren!" he called, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I froze, my pulse a drumbeat, the knife glinting in the dim light. He stopped at the bottom, his eyes flicking from me to the case, his face unreadable. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. I stood, my legs trembling, and held up a photo, my voice shaking but steady. "Who are they, Ethan? What did you do?" He didn't answer, just stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the light. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said, and for the first time, I saw it. The truth, cold and sharp, in the eyes of the man I loved. I don't know how I got out of that basement. It's a blur now, like a scene from someone else's life. My legs carried me past Ethan up the creaky stairs, out the front door before my brain could catch up. The cold Chicago air hit me like a slap, burning my lungs as I ran, those photos searing my mind. Women I didn't know, their faces twisted in fear, their lives reduced to IDs, jewellery, a stained knife in a locked case. I didn't grab my phone, my keys, nothing. Just kept moving, the streetlights blurring through tears I didn't feel falling. I ended up at Mia's, pounding on her door, my sobs choking out any words. She yanked me inside, her eyes wide, locking every bolt as I collapsed onto her couch, trying to explain. Ethan, my Ethan, the man who doodled hearts on my fridge, who'd proposed in a snowy park, wasn't real. He was something else, something dark, and I'd been sleeping next to it for years. Mia didn't flinch. She held me, her arms steady, and called the police, her voice calm even as her hands shook. When they arrived, 2 officers, one young with a notepad, the other older, his face lined with skepticism. I poured it all out. The notebook under the bed, with its cryptic names and dates. The letter in a woman's handwriting, warning, "I know what you are." The pearl earring in his car, the lie about his sister. And the case in the basement. Photos, wallets, that knife, its blade crusted with something I couldn't name. They listened, scribbling notes, but I saw their glances, the kind that said, "Hysterical wife, probably overreacting." "We'll check the house," the older one, Detective Harris, said, his tone flat. "Stay here tonight." They called back hours later and my stomach sank at Harris's voice. Ethan was gone. The case, the photos, the knife, missing, like they'd never existed. "No sign of forced entry," he said, as if that meant anything. They found the notebook, but it was just paper. Names, dates, places, no bloodstains, no confessions. The earring I'd held like evidence? Gone. My folder of articles, my late-night research connecting Ethan's log to missing women, vanished from under the couch. It was my word against nothing because Ethan had slipped away, leaving me to drown in my own story. "We'll keep looking," Harris said, but I heard the doubt, sharp as a blade. I couldn't go back to that house. The thought of those walls, that bed where I'd lain beside him, made my skin crawl. Mia's couch became my refuge, her small apartment a fortress of locked doors and drawn curtains. Sleep was a ghost, slipping through my fingers. Every creak was Ethan's footsteps, every shadow his crooked smile. I saw those women in my nightmares. Julia Kane, missing from Lincoln Park. Megan Lewis, gone from Edgewater. The unnamed woman in the photo with "Don't forget" scrawled on the back. Their eyes followed me, asking why I hadn't seen, why I hadn't saved them. I started therapy a week later, dragging myself to a cramped office where Dr. Patel, with her soft voice and kind eyes, tried to untangle my guilt. "You didn't know," she'd say. "You're not responsible for his choices." But the weight stayed, heavy as stone. How do you love a monster? How do you miss him, even now when you know what he is? I left Chicago, moving to my parents' house in a sleepy Wisconsin town where the biggest news was the annual fair. My mum hovered, piling plates with comfort food, while my dad fumbled for words, his hugs awkward but warm. I told them fragments, the notebook, Ethan's disappearance, leaving out the knife, the photos, the truth too heavy for their quiet world. They didn't push, but I saw their worry, the way they'd pause when I left the room, like I might vanish too. The police called sometimes, Harris's voice clipped with updates that weren't updates. No new leads. His accounts are dormant. Ethan was a phantom, erasing himself with a skill that chilled me. Had he planned this? Had he always known I'd find out? But I couldn't let it end there. Julia, Megan, Anna Ruiz, the names from his notebook weren't just initials to me anymore. They were women, with lives, laughter, dreams he'd stolen. I kept their stories in my head, those dates and places like a map I couldn't burn. One night, sleepless and restless, I opened my laptop and dove back in. I found the forums Mia had shown me, dark corners of the internet where people traded theories about Chicago's missing. I posted as Shadow Seeker, sharing the initials JK, ML, AR, and the locations Lincoln Park, West Loop, Edgewater. Most replies were noise, conspiracy nuts, trolls, but one caught my eye. Lakeview 88 claimed they'd known Julia Kane. "She was my neighbour," they wrote. "Sweet but jumpy, always checking her locks. Said some guy was following her, a teacher type. Last time I saw her, she was scared." My pulse raced. I messaged Lakeview 88. Cautious, but desperate. They were slow to trust, but over days, then weeks, we talked. Julia had been 27, a bartender with a laugh that filled a room. She'd mentioned a man. Charming, persistent, said he taught history. My stomach twisted. Ethan wasn't old enough to pass as older then, but lies were his currency. I sent Lakeview 88 a photo of him, one from our engagement, his smile wide and warm. Their reply hit like a fist. "That's him. Saw him outside her apartment once, leaning too close." I didn't stop there. I found Megan Lewis's sister, Carrie, through a Facebook group for families of the missing. She lived in Ohio, her voice raw when we spoke. "Meg was careful," she said, tears choking her words. "But she met this guy. Said he was a teacher. Funny, sweet. She changed after that, got quiet, stopped calling." I emailed her Ethan's photo, my heart pounding. Her response was immediate. "That's him. Who the hell is he?" Anna Ruiz was harder. No family online, just a missing persons report from 2018. But her name burned in my mind. Another piece of Ethan's puzzle. I called Harris, spilling everything, Lakeview 8 Carrie, the pattern. He didn't dismiss me this time. "It's a start," he said, his voice gruff but engaged. "Send me the details." I did every scrap, and he pulled in a task force, digging into Ethan's life like never before. They found holes, years he'd claimed to teach but had no records, trips he'd taken with no receipts. They talked to Claire, who crumbled under pressure, admitting Ethan had always been strange, vanishing for days, coming back with stories that didn't add up. "I thought he was cheating," she said, her voice breaking. "Not killing." Karen and Mike were next. Karen clung to her perfect son narrative, but Mike's silence spoke louder, his eyes avoiding the photos Harris showed them. 8 months after I'd run, they found a thread, a storage unit in Indiana, rented under a fake name, paid in cash for years. Harris called me at dawn, his voice tight. "We got something," he said. "You need to brace yourself." Inside the unit were boxes, echoes of the one I'd found. Photos, IDs, jewelry, another knife, this one clean but heavy with intent. There were diaries, too, not Ethan's, but a woman's. Pages torn, ink smudged, describing a man who'd promised love, but delivered fear. No names, but the dates lined up with Ana Ruiz's disappearance. The unit had Ethan's prints, a strand of his hair, and a burner phone with texts to an unknown number. "It's done. Move the rest." Harris wouldn't say more, but I felt it, the net tightening, the truth clawing its way out. I testified in a closed session, my voice trembling as I described the basement, the case, the moment Ethan's mask fell. I didn't see him, they hadn't caught him. But his absence was its own terror, a shadow I couldn't shake. The evidence was enough for a warrant. His face splashed across news alerts, billboards, America's Most Wanted. I watched those reports, my coffee cold, waiting for the call that said they'd found him. Sometimes I'd wake to nightmares of his voice, low and calm, "You weren't supposed to see." Muffin's warmth, her soft purr, was my anchor, pulling me back to the present. I moved again, to a coastal town in Oregon, where the ocean's roar drowned out my thoughts. I took a job designing book covers, something quiet, creative, mine. I cut my hair short, dyed it auburn, shedding the woman Ethan had known. Dr. Patel's sessions continued over video, her questions gentle but piercing, helping me name the guilt, the fear, the love I still fought. I started writing not just for therapy but for them, Julia, Megan, Anna. I launched a blog, Voices Unsilenced, anonymous but raw, telling their stories not as victims but as women who'd lived, loved, fought. Julia's laugh from her sister's stories, Megan's sketches shared by Carrie, Anna's poetry found in a library archive. I gave them breath, refused to let Ethan erase them. A year later, a package arrived, no return address. My hands went numb as I opened it. A single pearl earring, twin to the one from Ethan's car. A note typed, "No signature, come, you're closer than you think." I called Harris, my voice shaking, and he traced it to a post office in Seattle. No cameras, no witnesses. "He's playing with you," Harris said, his tone hard. "We're doubling down." I added cameras, a deadbolt, a panic button, but the earring haunted me, a taunt I couldn't ignore. I didn't hide, though. Hiding was what Ethan wanted. Instead, I wrote about it, my blog post going viral, drawing tips, leads, voices from other women who'd known men like him. Then a break, small but real. A hiker found a backpack in an Oregon forest, weathered but intact, with a wallet inside. Ana Ruiz's. No body, but her ID, her library card. A photo of her smiling at a cafe. Harris called it a significant find, said it pointed to Ethan moving west. They searched the area, found nothing else, but it was enough to keep the case alive, to keep me hoping. I flew to Chicago, met Carrie and Julia's family, held their hands as we laid flowers at a memorial for the missing. "You gave her back to us," Carrie said, her eyes wet. I didn't feel like a hero, just a woman who'd survived, carrying their stories like stones. 2 years in, Harris called again. They'd found Ethan, or what was left. A car crash in Idaho, a burned-out wreck, a body too charred for easy ID, but with Ethan's watch, his wedding ring, the one I'd slipped on his finger. Dental records were pending, but Harris was blunt. "It's probably him." I didn't cry, didn't cheer, just sat there, muffin on my lap, feeling nothing. Was it over? Or was it another trick? Another mask? The ring came back to me, mailed in a padded envelope, and I buried it in a drawer, unable to wear it, unable to throw it away. I'm still Lauren, but not the one who married Ethan. I'm sharper, braver, scarred, but standing. I run the blog, now a non-profit, funding searches for the missing, amplifying voices like Julia's, Megan's, Anna's. I speak at events, my face no longer hidden, my story a warning, a beacon. Ethan's shadow lingers. Another earring arrived last month. No note, no trace. But I don't run. I write, I fight, I live. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that truth is a fire. It burns, it scars, but it lights the way. For me, for them, for anyone listening, trust your fear. It's not weakness, it's power. And it might just save you from what's hiding under the bed.